Hello?
Call this meeting of the
Yes, and I
Governance
have
Committee
printed
to
or
order
whoever gets it
at
to.
1:09 on September 22nd. The Governance Committee Chair, Ian Solomon, last week over in the room and identified themselves. We have a number of lessons and member Jacobs with us online.
Rob Holland, acting Chief Operating Officer.
Jared Bryant, Superintendent.
Oh, Cody Grant, Manager of Business Management.
Andrew Ball, Employee Relations Specialist.
Matt Seifert, HR Chief.
Rory Yates, Teacher.
Amanda Foster, Executive Assistant to the School Board.
Margot Bellamy, School Board
And I forgot, I should
online.
eat a cookie when the meeting starts. First item on the agenda for discussion is the land acknowledgement proposal. I'll
Yes.
say, does anyone wish to speak to that?
I would, thank you. And I also want to thank Member Lessons for her, she gave some thought to the where we left off the last time, and I have incorporated some of that into the draft. So the draft, there are copies of the draft, and I'm gonna walk you through some changes, proposed changes, and hopefully we can get this out of committee today. At our last meeting, we made some changes, and those changes were basically near the end of the document. The thought was to remove the first. Let me do it another way. Let's just start from the top of the document. The part that you see underlined will not be underlined. We are going to add some of Member Lessons in that first whereas. We're going to add the language that she provided earlier today. And that language basically states, whereas the lands and waters on which the Anchorage School District was established have been cared for and continue to be cared for by the Dena'ina people through traditions passed from generation to generation. So that's not there, but that will be inserted. And then the next bullet would stay as it is. Well, this is our recommendation. Member Lessons did offer some changes there, but I want to say, I want to be, I guess, respectful of the work that we did with our Native Advisory Committee. And so we worked really hard with that committee to get their thinking and their passion and their hopes around what this would be. And so the language that is in the whereases, that is language other than what we changed. We changed in that first one, we changed, I think it was decolonization to equity and inclusion. We agreed on that at our last meeting, but all the other bullet points, I would recommend that they stay as they are. That first whereas, since we decided that we were going to direct the superintendent or not direct, I think we did use that language, but that I think we kind of do something else with that language. But anyway, since we are asking the superintendent to work with or collaborate with the Aklutna tribe to come up with a statement. It doesn't, and then in that statement, it's going to actually has to be approved by us. And then we will set the protocols for when it's to be used. I really took out any places in the policy. I think we need to take out any place where it's saying it's going to be used for this, that, and the other, because that's going to come back to us as part of the work that the superintendent is going to do. So that first, therefore, that first Anchorage School District resolves, that comes out, as well as all of that part of that, including the full land acknowledgement and the abbreviated land acknowledgement. So all of that will come out. That won't be there. So the last whereas will read, therefore, the Anchorage School District directs the superintendent to promote the necessary collaboration between the Eklutna tribe and the Anchorage School District to write a living land acknowledgement statement and bring that statement to the board for approval and ensure a required protocol for when and why to issue land acknowledgement at appropriate district-sponsored ceremonies and gatherings. And I apologize for not having this in writing for you. I don't know if I could send it, well, anyway. So that's kind of where I am. Member Jacobs, I will pivot to you as the co-sponsor on the resolution.
And just so you're aware, Member Higgins has joined the meeting as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, through the chair. I appreciate the now months of dialogue we've had as this proposed resolution has been workshopped and made into something that has had broad input, support, modification. As President Bellamy mentioned, this started months ago as an idea, and as time has allowed, we dedicated time to this. We've worked with the ASD Native Advisory Committee. We've now improved it here at the committee level. I think this represents a product that can and should be moved to the full board for consideration. My inclination is that this is something that would have support of 4 or more board members. Certainly, there might be individual members who would prefer to raise amendments if and when this becomes an action item. But I think this represents a pretty broad and reasonable compromise that captures the intent of what Member Bellamy and I set out to do, and what the Alaska or the ASD Native Advisory Committee provided feedback towards. And so definitely asking for the committee's support today and green lighting this for consideration by the full board, where we can discuss further amendments as members so choose. Thank you.
I have a point of information.
Mhm.
Are you saying the part that starts with the Anchorage School Board resolves is not part of the proposed language?
Right, because yeah, that's not, none of this and neither would that be.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Because we're asking the superintendent to come back to us with a statement, and then at that time, we will decide the protocol for using the statement.
And would it still be reasonable for the superintendent to propose several statements that are
Yes,
intended for different situations?
absolutely. Mhm,
Thank you.
mhm. That would be part of his report, once we get the statement.
And Member Lessons has her hand up.
Member Lessons?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the summary, Member President Bellamy, of the work you have done with Member Jacobs, with community stakeholders, and certainly absorbing my 2 cents here and there. Wanted to note from your just verbal description that the wording that I provided came from the third whereas on the document in front of you about the lands and waters. And so you would need to, if you moved my suggested phrasing up to the top, you might want to strike some or all of the
The
third
third whereas, yes.
So there's a little bit of wordsmithing that might still need to move forward. And I think I also appreciate, I appreciate removing what I thought was a little bit vague with the listing of the full versus the abbreviated land acknowledgement. And I would really like to see the superintendent define those times and spaces that would be appropriate, because I think having a tangible list, not one that is sort of including but not limited to, I think that sort of language would be too vague. but I would just like to define, we'll do it at school board meetings, we'll do it at certain ceremonies, we'll do it in, these places, I think would help all stakeholders understand when and where this might be expected. But as a member of the governance committee, I appreciate the work that's been done and would be happy to support moving it to the full board for the discussion that will ensue.
Thank you, Member Lessons.
And again, as a point of information, so the third whereas is,
So what she's saying is that I need to, the third whereas on the original was kind of morphed into the first, the way I'm going to change that. I'm going to put it at the top. So that will look different in the new policy. It'll just simply state that we're just going to word it differently so that we start out saying Anchorage School District is on, the Anchorage School District has been established on these lands.
okay.
And
So
I will send it out. I can send it out again. So that will change. That language will change. And the third whereas will on the original sheet 1, 2, 3. I'll just be redoing that particular.
You could probably delete the first 2 lines and begin a whereas with, whereas since the late 19th century, ... right?
Okay.
I think that was not included in the particular phrasing that I suggested. But if you wanted to keep that, the second 2 lines in the third whereas, I think you could continue those, just really dividing it.
Right. And I have a note on that. I will do that. I didn't want to take the time to do it now, but I want to answer the questions. So that will look different.
Okay.
So everybody knows that's going to look different.
Okay. You want to take some time, we circle back around towards the end of the meeting to look at what's proposed? Or
Sure.
Bring it to the.
I can make some updates and send them to Amanda.
Okay. Other comments or questions from anyone?
I'll just clean it up right now.
If not, we'll move on to board policy 3120.
I have copies of both of the attachments you sent me, if anyone needs them. I stapled them together.
Would anyone like to speak to the proposed?
I could.
Do you want version 3 or version 4 pulled up first?
We could start with 3.
Okay.
Here's some handouts. You guys need handouts?
And I'm just seeing version 3. And what I think is the original one. Why? Is there?
Thanks.
Yeah, there will be version 4 as well that was provided.
It's online.
Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah.
It's attached to the meeting. So version 3 is on top, version 4 is on the bottom.
Version 3 really is
Oh, got it.
in reference to the original draft policy that I brought forward for this committee to review some weeks ago. There was this version 3 that's on the screen now is substantially the same or almost identical to the version of the policy that you previously reviewed. There was a typo and one other minor edit, but I just wanted to bring it as part of the packet today so that we had a point of reference as to what we had previously reviewed when we brought this forward. Version 4 is in response to some questions and concerns, and I think interests that various that a couple different members of the committee brought forward in our prior review of this. Really, the attempt in version 4 is to add additional guidance, again, responsive to some questions and concerns that came forward from committee members as to couple different topics. One was, what about situations where employees have existing relationships with members of the community who may have students, and so there you can see in version 4 is a pre-existing outside relationships with students section added to the prior version. There was also some discussion when we discussed this earlier about use of technology. And again, there's a use of technology section added to version 4 responsive to that question or concern. So with that, I'm happy to respond to any particular questions about the item version or the new language in version 4. As members may have questions.
I'm
So
not
this
saying,
is the one
as I
that
read
was on
it,
the list. Yep.
still have kind of the same concern, and it seems like a blanket prohibition of communicating electronically with someone that may be a close friend of the family. And I think in situations where kids are out at an event together, or you're coordinating something, there just a lot of times where I communicated with my son and several of his friends at one time when they were all ASD students. And this would seem to prohibit that.
Can I offer a suggestion?
Yes, member Lessons.
I think that if you simply delete the section, so under use of technology, if you delete the online all the way through the word that, right? So staff are prohibited from communicating privately with students. Oops. And then it would say something like in any way that violates the law, district policies or procedures or professional standards. Right? Because that's really what we don't want is bad behavior.
Yeah, I will say, I think there's a zone that's not necessarily illegal, but it would also cross the professional boundary. And it's very complicated. You know, on one hand, I think we all know what we want, but it's very complicated to write. It's, and I'll say my personal feeling is part of the reason is the district has never really addressed its responsibility to establish a system for electronic communications with students that draws clear lines. And the technology is out there. And of course, it's not free. And it does mean changes in behavior of staff. We've just chosen never to do it. I mean, there are ways to facilitate electronic communication between teachers and staff where nobody knows each other's cell phone numbers. It is possible to establish district email accounts for students that are easily monitored and the records are there, and require those for use in the academic setting and for communication between staff and students. The district has never seen fit to go there for various reasons. And so unfortunately, we are left with people using their own phones, their own email accounts at times in ways that are leave things open to question. So I do have trouble developing a policy that potentially puts people at risk when everything they've done has been in everybody's best interest and innocent of any intended harm. I don't think the district has done this job on it either. So, even with member Weston's adjustment, If the district makes a policy that says you can't communicate directly, we're still in the same spot. If anyone wishes to respond.
I think it's written that you have 90% of your staff with kids. I'll say it a little bit louder so we can hear.
Yeah,
I think as written, you're gonna have 90% of your staff with kids in violation of this the moment it goes forward.
What specifically?
Kind of what Kelly had mentioned, member lessons, unless the student is like a real child state, anyway, communicating. I would just give I would be in violation. I was texting with my daughter's friends who were skiers down at Alyeska constantly, you know, trying to arrange meetups or, you know, where's Becca, or, I mean, it's innocent stuff that is, you know, you're just doing it. It's a way of life now. And so I don't know. I like your lines up top about maintaining professional boundaries and all that type of stuff. It's just, anyway, I'll just leave it at that. I just think that 90% of us would be in violation of that, who have children, who have friends, because we're all communicating in these group chats. And I'm one person I'm totally off of social media, but I know 90% of our teachers, that is a huge issue because they have, and I know many try to not have students as Facebook friends, right? Or whatever it is, but some do. And I've always been uncomfortable with that. So I don't do it, but they somehow are managing it. So.
When my son was an ASD student, I had a fake Facebook account that he unknowingly befriended me on, and several of his friends. This is part of my oversight of it in terms of what he was doing. I don't even know if the district would want to try to take a position on that. And I wouldn't care much. I mean, part of it is when you're raising your kid, you absolutely need to be involved with your friends. And part of that's just being able to contact them in the way that we contact people these days. And what you're talking about, perfect example. You're actually organizing a great activity, your child and other children. And it means being able to get in touch with all of them in an easy way. I just don't want people to worry about putting their job at risk in the process of doing something like that.
Would it, referencing the language that member Lessons and teacher Corey referenced, would it help to be clear that I think the intent is that the prohibition from communicating with students online and engaging in conduct, both of those concepts relate to situations where that communication violates the law, district policies or procedures, et cetera. So maybe more clearly drafting such that the prohibition of online communication, private online communication, there could be acceptable online communication so long as they don't violate the law, district policies or procedures or other generally recognized professional standards.
Or the student boundaries document.
adult student boundaries.
It just, I mean, that's the thing, we don't want people engaged in harmful online communication where
Okay.
they're basically carrying a relationship with a student that's inappropriate.
And
But
if
we don't want that in any kind of
Who was
medium.
that?
So I don't know that we need to particularly say, well, you can't do it electronically. You have to somehow get the kid to come sit in your car with you. That's inappropriate as well. So
Well, the funny thing is that the electronic stuff is findable, right? Like you could get all the texts, all the Facebook, I mean, all that stuff is findable. Conversations on the phone are not. So it's almost like we don't necessarily want to force inappropriate where we can't find it either.
I would encourage the superintendent, although I also have the feeling superintendent's a little busy right now. But there are systems designed for districts that facilitate the interchange to where all the conversations are recoverable, not actually phone conversations. But there are ways to facilitate the ability to text without exchanging numbers. And the contents are all captured and archived and automatically screened.
We do have various portals that allow those communications. Is it Remind, is that one of the?
Remind is one that has been used, and there's a new Stop It, which I'm not exactly sure how that's supposed to, I don't know if that interacts. I'm a little bit. I don't know how
Gaggle.net's the one that's been around the longest.
What's that?
Gaggle.net is the one that's been around the longest and actually makes use of Gmail now as the vehicle, but they put their own front end to it.
Is that a
We use it
communication
on-
platform now?
Second,
Is that a communication platform or a?
it always has been. What the district has used is the document storage, but it actually originated as an email system for schools to issue email accounts to students. And then they've got about a 20-some-year history of that. And it's gotten much more sophisticated. It does come with cost, and it does come with training staff to utilize it in the right ways. But
I think, can't students communicate with staff in their Canvas classrooms?
They do it.
Yeah.
So the issue, one of the primary issues is when they're not responding. The best way to get them to respond is a simple text.
Yeah.
That's where they are. They're not an email, they're not gonna, anyway, and that's been an issue because then I'm using my personal. Like I'm trying to do something good on behalf of the student, but I'm violating what I would be as my comfort level.
And then the other part is sort of aggressively, I've always followed it the same way. There's a reason we have a fence around our playground. We want a clear boundary to where students can go and not go, and where the outside public can and can't go. And tell our students, when you're inside our fence, we're watching it, and you're under our rules. And when you're outside the fence, you're outside the fence, and we don't have responsibility for that. But that's, when you talk to Mike Buckenstein, he'll know exactly who told you this. It's something I brought up a long time ago, and wasn't very much interest in it. But we need to train our students on appropriate boundaries, just like we do staff. And that's one way of doing it, is to actually engage and have a system. You say, this is how you behave here. And if you're going to behave otherwise, don't be mean, don't be around me, don't be in school. But that is going off to the side again.
And then member lessons also has hurricane grace.
Yes, member lessons.
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to return to Mr. Tford's comment and just say, yeah, I would be supportive of an edit of that line to really define that we don't want private communication that is malfeasant, that violates practice.
Oh, I was just asking if today was the day, if you went and did your thing.
Carl,
I
mute
muted
yourself.
him.
Okay.
Thank you, member Lessons. I think I captured your
Thank you.
comment. I would want to point out also in the one other change as between version 3 and 4, and this is in reference to a comment earlier today that there is another sentence in the first paragraph that does address the notion that we're addressing concerning behaviors and improper interactions, but also understanding that there is the concern that these communications be used in a way that is grooming or other boundary blurring behaviors that may lead to those subsequent behaviors. So another of the, I guess, areas of comment that I captured in my notes from last time.
Can I just jump in? I thought that the use of precursor grooming was a little strong. For whatever that's worth.
ASB template language.
That's AASB template language,
Oh,
but
okay.
I adjust that just I'm not sure where that term.
Because that would fit right into that narrative out there that we are somehow grooming and.
Yeah, it's a
indoctrinating.
pretty triggering word for many people, or it could be a triggering word. And so I
Sure, I
want
bring that
to
up
just
with the
go
ASB.
right to the boundary blurring behaviors that could be egregious.
Okay,
Yeah,
Although
I would agree with that.
Not to sound like I'm being wishy-washy.
Yes, you are.
Yes, I am. I don't object to that language being in there. I think it's very specific. And it does address the kind of language that we want to stop versus the kind of language that you were talking about in organizing a group ski or a party after group ski or something like that.
Can we review it again next year? Because right now, I'm telling you, Andy,
Mhm.
there is that.
I do know, I'm totally aware of how there's some people trying to accuse all educators
Of being groomers.
And when I'm talking to those people, I explain that,
That's
no,
not
we
what
actually
we're
have to
doing.
be on guard about that it's not simply, and there are people within educational districts that do it. And because we have kids, and it's kind of like the bank has money, that's why all the robberies happen there. We have kids, and that draws people that do want to prey on kids. So we do have to be alert to it and be aware of it. And I also tell them that their accusations simply muddy the water so that people that do want to hurt kids have cover. That if they think somebody's grooming a kid, they need to report them or shut up. Sorry, I'm being carried away again.
Yeah, you are.
I don't know, Thursdays are just
Do I need?
really emotional for
You
me.
need to.
So I don't know, I will disagree. So I like the language as it's written in there. That's something we can have a great argument about.
What do you think, Matt? I
I
know it's ASB language, but
just pointed it out so as to not
Mhm.
suggest to take ownership of it. I don't know what into the decision to include that. What the discussion around that was. I understand the concerns of both sides and will of the board on that.
yeah.
If I could
Dr.
just chime in, I would just wonder, has AASB defined what precursor grooming is? I feel
Right.
like that could make implementation of the policy very.
I have no
ambiguous.
idea, but I can follow up with them, but.
Yeah, if they haven't defined it, then it might be a liability to have it in there.
Because it's not, if it just hanging by itself like that with no definition, it scares me a little bit.
As a general matter, is the board more inclined for me to pursue these additional changes working on version 4, or do we want to go back to the simpler version 3? Again, version
This was a
4
simpler
captures
version.
everything from version 3 and then adds to it, so. It sounds like I'll need to take it away and come back for another review, so.
I like which version of this we were just working on? 4?
Is for
Well, I like version 4 myself, but I'm more interested in just having the policy in place that does what we need it to do.
And I appreciate that it specifies that it applies to volunteers and all of the other folks who might come into contact with our students. I think that's a good umbrella to put in place.
Mr. Reese?
Chief Tieford, in relationships with students, the last paragraph, shall members, anyway, regardless of any pre-existing relationship with students outside, I'm just wondering if that sentence should be removed, because I think we want to follow whether I'm working or not. Like, the boundaries need to be kept whether I'm working or not. So I wasn't sure if that sentence. You know what I mean? Some of you think about that.
Where's that at?
6 paragraphs from the top. Staff members shall. And then it's the second sentence, regardless of any pre-existing relationship with students outside of work, when on the job as an educator, staff shall abide by this policy. I think I need to abide by the policy whether I'm at school or not. That's what
Yeah,
that's why I'm
absolutely.
It's giving me an out outside the school. Does that make sense?
I was off the clock.
I understand your point. The way I read that is that you don't get a pass if you have a pre-existing relationship in your interactions with that student when you're in
That's true.
school. So you
I see.
can't bring your personal relationship or with a student into the classroom such that it influences your interactions with that student. Maybe you're more casual with that student
Okay.
than you otherwise should be. But if
Giving
it's
them rides,
confusing, I can
feeding
take a look at the rewrite.
Well, then maybe just add something about professional boundaries must be followed. Staff
Okay.
shall abide by professional,
Gotcha.
yeah, continue to follow professional boundaries.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, the idea of favoritism to a student.
Yeah, I
don't know if it's written
didn't
down
read that in
anywhere.
there, favoritism or, prior relationship. type of
We got one more
influences in that
policy to do,
regard.
right?
I was more in the negative space.
Okay.
Any other suggestions, comments?
I can just comment as Andrew Ball, not as employee relations specialist. So Andrew Ball is dad hat, 2 daughters in high school right now, 1 son who's just started college. I've actually never once texted any of their friends and don't plan on it. And some families do find that inappropriate. And conversely, I've talked to my kids about their friends' parents texting them, and I want to know if they were. So I don't know about the 90% of it, but just know that there's other school of thought out there that would find that inappropriate.
Yeah, I was very uncomfortable with it, limited it myself, but
Yeah.
sometimes I was forced into it. So.
Now into Andrew Ball is employee relations.
Step back in, step on in.
Into there, I've been doing our adult student boundaries training since Margot hired me 10 years ago. And we had a policy that outlined adult student boundaries really well. It didn't carry over into the new policy.
To the new policy, yeah.
So we did have stuff that talked about electronic communication, shall not happen, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just glad that it's coming before the board to become a policy again. Needs to happen. We haven't let our foot off gas pedal on addressing issues that still come up in that area because we're still training people every year. But I think that people need specifics where we can give them. They need expectations, and if you leave it up to them, they're going to define. Even if we get the best language in the world here, they're going to carve out and define what I did is right and this is wrong. So if the board can get something in place, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I do think there's a certain type of behavior that we object to, and it really doesn't matter how it happens. I do understand electronics is a nutrient-rich environment for bad things to grow. So it does warrant a special look, but it also has become so basic to how a lot of us get through the day and keep up with everything we're keeping up with. So I don't know. I do not envy Mr. Teeper's job in trying to define this in ways that are clear and let good people do the work they do, but also make clear what's questionable. Because we do need clear boundaries so that when we observe things, we know when it's time to report and all of that. Okay. Anyone else? Seeing no hands. My agenda keeps going, so.
So we're on the next one.
Anti-bullying policy.
And Carl did send, anyone wants handouts, his proposed memo and policy.
And Mr. Chair, if I can have the floor, I'd be glad to introduce, explain, and then answer questions.
Certainly, take it away, Mr. Judges.
Thank you very much. So folks, this is a hopefully non-controversial, pretty open and shut instance where definitely we're seeking the governance committee's approval to move forward to the full board. Full disclosure, I anecdotally talked about the brief concept because this really is just a 2 to 3 sentence change to board policy with members Holloman and Wilson. But in terms of the actual language, this is their first time seeing it as well. So I'm all for a full-throated discussion. Essentially what this does is add language to the relevant bullying, harassment, intimidation board policy, which requires administration to facilitate a method of anonymous reporting for students, volunteers, and staff. This is becoming more prevalent for a variety of reasons. Although we're placing this in our bullying, harassment, and intimidation policy, there's certainly ties to school safety as well. There are districts like the Umetsu Borough School District who have implemented something similar, and they have served roughly 19,000 students, up to Palm Beach School District in Florida, which has 4 to 5 times as many students as we do. So districts of all size are implementing a method for students, staff, and volunteers to anonymously report concerns. It just makes sense as a way to do that, as there are some individuals, for a variety of reasons, that will not feel comfortable bringing concerns forward, and that leads to underreporting, unresolved issues, and behaviors cycling and spiraling into something greater than they need to. So the policy attempts to address that. Additional relevant information: I have been in contact with ASD administration regarding this. The administration intends to roll out, my understanding, a solution here as soon as next month, in part to comply with this board policy through a partnership that's being facilitated between it's the SERRC, or Alaska's Educational Resource Center, and a organization called Stop It Solutions, which has partnered with 6,000 districts nationwide. They have ties to the organization Sandy Hook Promise. While I won't speak too much to administration's intent, just my own research, they would offer a methodology of anonymous reporting, as well as provide potential clinical supports, as well as off-hours reporting, and handle a lot of that frontline work, which would hopefully help ASD administration security staff triage reports as they come in. And so there's a lot to like about that proposed course of action. But what we're doing in the policy essentially is codifying what administration intends to move forward, is again, potentially, as I understand it, as soon as next month, in line with the month of October being anti-bullying month. And so this would ensure that the program remains a priority for the district, and providing that safe space to make concerns known. There is also an additional language related to false reporting, which I modeled loosely off of language that's in Juneau's similar board policy. That in essence indicates that the board prioritize, or sees as a priority, that if those that are out there who seek to abuse the system of anonymous reporting, that the district take reasonable action accordingly. So kind of a check and balance there. I think that the data shows that this is a good idea. I think that this is a benefit to providing a safe and welcoming education environment for all students. To me, this is a relatively easy sell. I'm hoping that the committee agrees and we can take this forward to the full board. Thank you.
Any comments or input from anyone else? But the member Lessons had to leave the meeting.
Oh,
Ms. Trace?
Do we have a definition of what bullying looks like, sounds like, and feels like?
That is in the existing board policy. It's just not in the highlighted version. What's at the attachment references the additional language, but we have existing board policy that defines it, I believe.
I'd have to look that up.
Yeah, we should.
Perhaps Amanda can pull up the full existing policy. Again, I only copied the portions of the policy that we're modifying, which is a small subset.
Don't be pushing Amanda around like that.
No, I won't. We can vote in any order as well, Amanda, so whatever works.
It's gonna be just a second.
Just speaking to the general board policy, this is one that is an AASB policy. We have the most current version at this point. I verified that with AASB, and so this would making sure that we're updating everything at once, just adding new language.
We're pausing for a moment while they try to pull that up. And we've got it on the screen here, board policy 5131.43.
Yeah, but so you can see it outlines more detail, and I think there's even a specific section on cyberbullying.
Where do you see it?
It's down, if you scroll down, there's a definition
There we go.
of that includes bullying.
There you go.
Yeah, physically harms a student or damages a student's property, has the effect of substantially interfering with the student's education, is so severe, persistent, or pervasive that it creates an intimidating or threatening education law. That has the effect of substantially disrupting the orderly operation of the school. And then there's another section on cyberbullying.
Yeah.
In addition, Mr. Chair, the last thing I'll mention is that in addition to the suggested language change, I did include a ready to endorse and forward to President Bellamy memorandum, which, if the committee supports this change, references existing policy, some underlying data, some rationale. So the work is pretty much already done for the committee, just again seeking endorsement of kind of this relatively small change that reflects work that administration intends to perform here shortly anyway, is my understanding.
Yeah, this won't be.
Any other comments, questions, or input? If not, I would entertain a motion that this be forwarded to the whole board for consideration.
I mean, I mean, who's on the committee?
Well, you're on all the committees.
Okay, I so move.
Okay. Is there a second? I have to admit, I forget who's the member of the committee as well, except for me.
Yeah, it's on the. Should be Donnelly. Oh, yeah. Lessons had to leave, so you're the chair. Donnelly's not here, so that just leaves you, me,
Okay.
and Carl. Wait,
I'll
not
second
Carl. But you can second.
Yeah, I'll second it. I guess you and I will vote on it.
Yes,
Yes.
so it's
Okay.
out. But I would like, I don't know, administration, if you guys had any comments relative to the reporting? I mean,
Well, I do, I wish I didn't, but
okay,
there's a reference in false report. It's a small thing, but there
false report, okay.
are, when it comes to staff discipline, there are, of course, principles of due process, just cause, and so forth, that the phrase will be subject to disciplinary action gives me a little pause. It could be interpreted to mean there's no discretion or opportunity for consideration of mitigating circumstances, whatever the case may be. it's a little bit technical, but disciplinary action in the employment context has particular meaning to me, obviously, because of my role.
Mhm.
And there are approaches that are not disciplinary that may be appropriate under certain circumstances. So it's just an observation. If the intent is to mandate discipline in all cases, then I'm concerned if it's that we consider that they're subject to disciplinary
To
action.
discipline, how can we?
So, yeah,
Maybe,
if we switch will to may, I think that would resolve it. This board policy isn't intended to mandate action by administration. With that said, I would hope if someone is found to have abused the new tool being rolled out, that be taken very seriously, which is the intent of that language.
Absolutely, thank you.
And I'll say I had that thought when I first read it, but also the fact that it says knowingly or willfully. That it's not mandating that someone who mistakenly makes a false report or truly believed they were making an accurate report. But I'm also fine with the may being in there as well. in terms of discussion. Okay. So with that change, I still have no objection. And do always feel free to voice those doubts. and
yeah,
concerns.
absolutely.
Any other comments before we move on from this?
Nope.
Seeing none, we circle back around to our land use statement.
I cleaned it up, but it still needs like grammar, which it still needs to be touched up. Because I noticed some of the whereases weren't bolded, I think I left a colon or two off. But just so you can see it, it is now a one-page document. And for that third paragraph that Kelly offered language for, or highlighted that it was might be a duplicate to the first, I fixed that. Removed the first whereas on the bottom, so we only have the one at this time.
So I would offer the choice, obviously, October 27th is our next meeting. Or we can make a decision on what's in front of us with cleanup language presented at the board meeting.
Yeah, it's just the colons and a
Yeah.
bold.
Okay.
So it can go on non-action for October 4th.
Okay.
Okay.
Was that a motion you just made? I think I
Yes,
heard that.
that's the motion.
I would second that, and then I suspect you and I will agree on it. So that will go to the board with the expectation there will be some grammatical changes.
Yes.
So,
Appreciate it.
any new business that anyone needs to bring before the committee? Seeing no hands, although I have to not have my eyes closed. If there are none, then we can bring this meeting to a close almost on time.
Right, almost on time.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Good to see you, Andrew.